My name is Penelope and I just turned 58. I should have been celebrating with my family, but instead I was staring at a bank statement, the numbers mocking me. Something inside me finally exploded after years of being a human ATM for my children. Have you ever felt like your own family was slowly draining the life out of you? Our family started out like any other, a hopeful unit in a small, cozy house in the suburbs of Portland, Oregon. My husband, Robert, worked hard, and I managed the household. We had 2 biological children, Sarah, now 35, and Michael, 32. They were bright, energetic kids. Then, 15 years ago, we adopted David, then 8, a quiet, observant boy from a foster home who dreamed of nothing but big trucks. Our socioeconomic status was comfortable middle class. The family dynamics were subtle at first. Sarah, the eldest, always expected a certain level of support for her creative endeavors, which mostly involved expensive art supplies and never-finished projects. Michael, the charming one, had a knack for getting into financial scrapes that always seemed to land at my doorstep. Robert, bless his heart, believed in supporting our children's dreams, which often translated into me being the one to foot the bill. David, on the other hand, was always independent, fascinated by the mechanics of things and never asked for much. The unspoken rule was always, "Mom will fix it." My childhood was marked by a strict upbringing where financial independence was paramount. I learned to save, to plan. Sarah and Michael, however, grew up with a safety net I hadn't had, and perhaps that's where the disconnect began. A significant turning point was when Robert's business had a downturn 10 years ago. It tightened our belts, but for Sarah and Michael, it seemed to simply mean I had to work harder to maintain their accustomed lifestyle, not that they needed to adjust their expectations. The first signs were small. Sarah needed just a little money for a photography course. Michael needed a loan for car repairs that somehow never got repaid. It was always presented as temporary, urgent. I remember one Christmas 15 years ago, Sarah asked for a professional-grade camera, claiming it was essential for her future career. I bought it. It gathered dust. This pattern escalated gradually. First, it was a few $100s. Then it became thousands. Michael's investments in dubious online ventures, Sarah's business startups that never launched. The conflict evolved from minor requests to significant demands, always framed as opportunities one couldn't possibly let them miss. The situation became normalized. "Oh, that's just Sarah," or "Michael always needs a little help." My friends would sometimes comment, "Penelope, aren't they a little old for that?" I'd just shrug it off, rationalizing it as parental support. I ignored countless red flags. The constant calls for money, the vague explanations, the lack of transparency. I remember a specific conversation 8 years ago when Michael asked for $10,000 for a can't-miss tech startup. Robert said, "Maybe we should think about this, Penny." I replied, "He's our son, Robert. We have to support him." We gave him the money. That startup vanished faster than a summer breeze. I saw the signs, the endless cycle, but I just kept pushing it down, believing it was my duty. The problem manifested in countless ways, each one chipping away at my savings and my peace of mind. 4 years ago, Sarah needed $15,000 for a pop-up art gallery in downtown Portland. "Mom, this is my big break. All the local artists are talking about it," she gushed over the phone, her voice dripping with artificial excitement. I felt a familiar pang of dread, but also a sliver of hope that this time, it would be different. I pulled the money from my retirement savings. The gallery lasted 3 weeks, selling 2 paintings, neither of them hers. The entire investment gone. 2 years ago, Michael, after losing his job for the 3rd time in 5 years, demanded $20,000 for business school tuition. "Look, Mom, this is my chance to get serious, to finally make something of myself," he pleaded, his voice cracking with feigned sincerity. I saw through it, I really did, but the guilt, the desperate need to believe in my children, won out. I transferred the funds. He never enrolled. The money disappeared into online gambling sites, a fact I only learned much later. I lost sleep, constantly worried about the next demand, the next fabricated emergency. My financial advisor called me several times, expressing concern about the significant withdrawals. I just brushed him off, muttering about family investments. Last year, David, my adopted son, finally saved enough money from working odd jobs and driving local routes to put a down payment on an older, used semi-truck. He had been dreaming of being a trucker since he was a little boy, and he worked tirelessly to make it happen. He never asked for a dime, only for my support and encouragement. When he told me he was close to buying his own truck, I was overcome with pride. I surprised him by paying off the remaining $30,000 balance on his dream truck. It wasn't a loan. It was a gift from a mother to a son who had shown nothing but responsibility and gratitude. My friends, particularly Susan, had been trying to talk sense into me for years. "Penelope, you're enabling them," she'd say gently over coffee, shaking her head. My husband, Robert, grew increasingly frustrated, his quiet disapproval becoming more pronounced with each new request. "Penny, we can't keep doing this," he'd sigh, looking at the dwindling savings. I sacrificed vacations, new clothes, even delayed necessary home repairs. Over the past 10 years, I estimate I've given Sarah and Michael close to $250,000. That's $250,000, money that should have been securing my retirement. The absolute last straw, the event that finally shattered my illusion of a functional family, happened just 3 weeks ago. It was my birthday dinner, a quiet affair at home with Robert, Sarah, Michael, and David. We were laughing, sharing stories, when Sarah, completely unprompted, said, "Mom, can we talk about something important?" Privately, I excused myself to the kitchen. Michael followed. "Mom, we heard you bought David a truck," Michael began, his tone accusatory, not celebratory. "It was a gift, Michael. He's worked so hard," I said, a defensive edge in my voice. Sarah leaned in, her eyes narrowed. "A gift? A $40,000 truck, Mom? And what about us? We're your blood children. What about you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, a cold dread washing over me. "Well, I need capital for my new sustainable fashion line, and Michael needs a down payment for a house," Sarah continued, as if reciting a shopping list. "We figured, since you're so generous with David, you could easily give us each $50,000. I stared at them, my vision blurring. This wasn't about need, it was about entitlement, about demanding what they felt was owed. 50,000 each? Are you insane? I've given you hundreds of thousands already." My voice rose, trembling with a mixture of disbelief and rage. "It's not enough, Mom. David gets a truck, and we get nothing? It's not fair." Michael interjected, his face contorted in a sneer. "Fair? You think this is fair?" I spat, my voice now a furious roar. "I have bled myself dry for you too. I've sacrificed my retirement, my peace of mind, everything, for your endless schemes and irresponsible habits. And you have the audacity to come to me demanding more because I gave a gift to a son who actually appreciates it and uses it to build a life." Sarah scoffed. "If you don't help us, we'll have to consider other options. Maybe you're not fit to manage your own finances anymore. We're just looking out for your best interests, Mom." The implication hung heavy in the air. They were threatening to declare me incompetent, to get a conservatorship, to literally lock me away from my own money. My stomach churned. Robert, who had been listening from the dining room, walked in, his face pale. David, hearing the raised voices, stood in the doorway, his eyes wide with confusion and hurt. I felt a seismic shift within me. This was no longer just about money. It was about my autonomy, my very freedom. "Get out. Both of you. Get out of my house," I whispered, the words barely audible but loaded with a newfound resolve. Sarah and Michael exchanged a look of shock, then quickly retreated, their faces a mixture of anger and disbelief. Robert put a hand on my shoulder, his touch a silent promise of support. David quietly went back to his room. The very next morning, my first action was to call my lawyer, Mr. Henderson. "I need to draft new wills and powers of attorney immediately," I told him, my voice firm despite the lingering tremor from the previous night. I explained the situation, the threats. He listened patiently, then assured me he would protect my interests. Next, I contacted my bank and financial advisor. I set up a trust, placing the majority of my assets beyond the direct reach of Sarah and Michael. I also established strict new rules for access to my remaining accounts. My financial advisor helped me set up automatic transfers into a separate retirement fund that could not be easily accessed. Sarah and Michael's resistance was immediate and fierce. My phone rang off the hook with their angry calls and accusatory texts. "How could you do this to us, Mom? You're cutting us off? What kind of mother are you?" They even showed up at my house unannounced, demanding explanations. "This isn't up for discussion," I told them calmly but firmly from behind a locked door. "My decisions are final." Robert stood beside me, a silent but powerful support system. David, too, quietly offered his solidarity, making sure I felt loved and appreciated. I started attending a support group for parents dealing with adult children who exhibit financial exploitation. It was a revelation to hear others share similar stories, and it made me feel less alone, less guilty. The immediate results were jarringly quiet. The constant demands ceased. The accusations, however, escalated to social media posts, painting me as a cruel, unloving mother who abandoned her blood children for an adopted stranger. It hurt deeply, but a new sense of peace, a quiet strength began to settle over me. For the first time in years, I felt like I was breathing freely. My sleep improved, and the constant knot of anxiety in my stomach began to unravel. The changes rippled through our family, creating new, healthier dynamics, albeit with some painful adjustments. Sarah and Michael, faced with the reality of my unwavering stance, eventually backed off, though their resentment still simmers beneath the surface. They rarely call now, and when they do, the conversations are strained, devoid of their usual demands. It's a sad reality, but it's a consequence of their choices, not mine. As for me, my personal growth has been profound. I've learned that love isn't about enabling destructive behavior. It's about setting boundaries, even if those boundaries cause pain. I found my voice, my resolve. I no longer feel the crushing weight of guilt every time I say no. Robert and I have rediscovered our sense of partnership, strengthened by this shared challenge. Our evenings are now filled with genuine conversation, not whispered worries about our children's latest financial crisis. New rules are firmly in place. No more financial bailouts, no more open-ended loans. Any discussions about money are met with a firm, "That's not an option." Our relationship with David, however, has flourished. He regularly calls, sharing stories from the road, genuinely interested in our lives. He's building his business, steadily and responsibly, a stark contrast to his siblings. He even insisted on taking us out for dinner to celebrate his first year of successful trucking, something Sarah and Michael never once offered. The most profound lesson I've learned is that letting go of what you cannot control, even if it's your own children's choices, is essential for your own well-being. It's a painful process of acceptance, but it's liberating. Today, my life is immeasurably lighter. Sarah and Michael occasionally send a curt text or an email, but the constant pressure is gone. They are navigating their own lives, for better or worse, without my financial intervention. David is thriving, his trucking business growing, and his calls are always a source of joy. I've started painting again, a hobby I abandoned years ago due to stress and lack of time. Robert and I are planning a trip to Italy next year, something we've dreamed of for decades, but never felt we could afford. The key lesson from my story is this: you can't pour from an empty cup. Loving your family doesn't mean sacrificing yourself entirely. Setting boundaries, even with those you love most, isn't selfish, it's self-preservation. If you're going through something similar, remember that your worth isn't tied to how much you give, but to how much you value yourself. Don't be afraid to reclaim your life. What have you sacrificed for others, and what did you gain when you finally put yourself first? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might be the one someone else needs to hear.